Chapter 5 of The Bird's Christmas Carol. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin. Chapter 5. Some Other Birds Are Taught to Fly. Before the earliest Ruggles could wait and toot his 5-cent tin horn, Mrs. Ruggles was up and stirring about the house, for it was a gala day in the family. Gala day! I should think so! Were not her 9 children invited to a dinner party at the great house, and weren't they going to sit down free and equal with the mightiest in the land? She had been preparing for this grand occasion ever since the receipt of the invitation, which, by the way, had been speedily enshrined in an old photograph frame and hung under the looking-glass in the most prominent place in the kitchen, where it stared the occasional visitor directly in the eye, and made him pale with envy. Bird's Nest, December 17, 1880. Dear Mrs. Ruggles, I am going to have a dinner party on Christmas Day, and would like to have all your children come. I want them every one, please, from Sarah Maud to baby Larry. Mama says dinner will be at 5:30, and the Christmas tree at 7, so you may expect them home at 9 o'clock. Wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I am, yours truly, Carol Bird. Breakfast was on the table promptly at 7 o'clock, and there was very little of it, too, for it was an excellent day for short rations, though Mrs. Ruggles heaved a sigh as she reflected that even the boys, with their India-rubber stomachs, would be just as hungry the day after the dinner party as if they had never had any at all. As soon as the scanty meal was over, she announced the plan of the campaign. "Now, Susan, you and Kitty wash up the dishes, and Peter, can't you spread up the beds, so I can get ter cutting out Larry's new suit? I ain't satisfied with his clothes, and I thought in the night of a way to make him a dress out of my old plaid shawl, kind of Scotch style, yer know. You boys clear out from underfoot. Clem, you and Con hop into bed with Larry while I wash your underflannins. 'Twon't take long to dry 'em. Sarah Maud, I think 'twould be perfectly handsome if you ripped them brass buttons off your uncle's policeman's coat and sewed 'em in a row up the front o' your green skirt. Susan, you must iron out yours and Kitty's aprons. And there! I can mighty near forgettin' Peory's stockin's. I counted the whole lot last night when I was washin' of 'em, and there ain't but 19. Anyhow, you're fix 'em, and no 9 pairs mates nohow, and I ain't goin' ter have my children wearin' odd stockin's to a dinner comp'ny, brought up as I was. Eily, can't you run out and ask Mis' Cullen ter lend me a pair o' stockin's for Peory, and tell her if she will, Peory'll give Jim half her candy when she gets home. Won't yer, Peory?" Peoria was young and greedy, and thought the remedy so much worse than the disease that she set up a deafening howl at the projected bargain, a howl so rebellious and so out of all season that her mother started in her direction with flashing eye and uplifted hand. But she let it fall suddenly, saying, "No, I won't lick your Christmas Day, if yer drive me crazy, but speak up smart, now, and say whether yer'd rather give Tim Cullen half your candy or go bare-legged ter the party." The matter being put so plainly, Peoria collected her faculties, dried her tears, and chose the lesser evil, Clem having hastened the decision by an affectionate wink. That meant he'd go halves with her on his candy. "That's a lady!" cried her mother. "Now, you young ones that ain't doin' nothin', play all yer want ter before noontime, for after ye git through eatin' at 12 o'clock, me and Sarah Maud's goin' ter give yer such a washin' and combin' and dressin' as yer never had before, and never will again, and then I'm goin' to set yer down and give you 2 solid hours' trainin' in manners, and 'twon't be no foolin' neither." "All we've got to do's go eat," grumbled Peter. "Well, that's enough," responded his mother. "There's more'n one way of eatin', let me tell yer, and you've got a heap to learn about it, Peter Ruggles. Lord sakes! I wish you children could see the way I was fetched up to eat. Never took a meal of vittles in the kitchen before I married Ruggles, but yer can't keep up that style with 9 young ones, and yer pa always off ter sea." The big Ruggleses worked so well, and the little Ruggleses kept from underfoot so successfully, that by 1 o'clock 9 complete toilets were laid out in solemn grandeur on the beds. I say complete, but I do not know whether they would be called so in the best society. The law of compensation had been well applied. He that had necktie had no cuffs, she that had sash had no handkerchief, and vice versa, but they all had boots and a certain amount of clothing, such as it was, the outside layer being in every case quite above criticism. "Now, Sarah Maud," said Mrs. Ruggles, her face shining with excitement, "everything is red up, and we can begin. I've got a boiler and a kettle and a pot of hot water. Peter, you go into the back bedroom, and I'll take Susan, Kitty, Peory, and Cornelius, and Sarah Maud, you take Clem and Ely and Larry, one at a time, and get as fur as you can with 'em, and then I'll finish 'em off while you do yourself." Sarah Maud couldn't have scrubbed with any more decision and force if she had been doing floors, and the little Ruggleses bore it bravely, not from natural heroism, but for the joy that was set before them. Not being satisfied, however, with the tone of their complexions, she wound up operations by applying a little Bristol brick from the knife board, which served as the proverbial last straw, from under which the little Ruggleses issued rather red and raw and out of temper. When the clock struck 3 they were all clothed, and most of them in their right minds, ready for those last touches that always took the most time. Kitty's red hair was curled in 34 ringlets, Sarah Maud's was braided in 1 pigtail, and Susan's and Ely's in 2 braids apiece, while Peoria's resisted all advances in the shape of hair oils and stuck out straight on all sides, like that of the Circassian girl of the circus, so Clem said, and he was sent into the bedroom for it too, for whence he was dragged out forgivingly by Peoria herself 5 minutes later. Then, exciting moment, came linen collars for some, and neckties and bows for others, and, Eureka! The Ruggleses were dressed, and Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. A row of seats was formed directly through the middle of the kitchen. There were not quite enough chairs for 10, since the family had rarely all wanted to sit down at once, somebody always being out or in bed, but the wood box and the coal hod finished out the line nicely. The children took their places according to age, Sarah Maud at the head and Larry on the coal hod, and Mrs. Ruggles seated herself in front, surveying them proudly as she wiped the sweat of honest toil from her brow. "Well," she exclaimed, "if I do say so as shouldn't, I never see a cleaner, more stylish mess of children in my life. I do wish Ruggles could look at ye for a minute. Now I've often told you what kind of family the McGrills was. I've got some reason to be proud. Your uncle is on the police force o' New York City. You can take up the newspaper most any day and see his name printed right out, James McGrill, and I can't have my children fetched up common, like some folks. When they go out they've got to have clothes and learn ter act decent. Now I want ter see how you're goin' to behave when you git there tonight. Let's start at the beginnin' and act out the whole business. Pile into the bedroom there, every last one of you, and show me how you're goin' to go into the parlor. This'll be the parlor, and I'll be Miss Bird." The youngsters hustled into the next room in high glee, and Mrs. Ruggles drew herself in her chair with an infinitely haughty and purse-proud expression that much better suited a descendant of the McGrills than modest Mrs. Bird. The bedroom was small, and there was presently ensued such a clatter that you would have thought a herd of wild cattle had broken loose. The door opened, and they straggled in, all the little ones giggling, with Sarah Maud at the head, looking as if she had been caught in the act of stealing sheep, while Larry, being last in line, seemed to think the door a sort of gate of heaven which would be shut in his face if he didn't get there in time. Accordingly he struggled ahead of his elders and disgraced himself by tumbling in head foremost. Mrs. Ruggles looked severe. "There, I knew you'd do some sech fool way. Try it again, and if Larry can't come in on 2 legs he can stay ter home." The matter began to assume a graver aspect. The little Ruggleses stopped giggling and backed into the bedroom, issuing presently with lockstep, Indian file, a scared and hunted expression in every countenance. "No, no, no!" cried Mrs. Ruggles in despair. "You look for all the world like a gang o' prisoners. There ain't no style ter that. Spread out more, can't yer, and act kind o' careless like. Nobody's goin' to kill ye." The third time brought deserved success, and the pupils took their seats in the row. "Now yer know," said Mrs. Ruggles, "there ain't enough decent hats to go round, and if there was, I dunno so I'd let yer wear 'em, for the boys would never think to take 'em off when they got inside, but anyhow, there ain't enough good ones. Now, look me in the eye. You needn't wear no hats, none of yer. And when you git int the parlor, and they ask you for ter lay off yer hats, Sarah Maud must speak up and say it was sech a pleasant evenin' and sech a short walk that you left yer hats to home to save trouble. Now can you remember?" All the little Ruggleses shouted, "Yes, marm," in chorus. "What have you got ter do with it?" demanded their mother. "Did I tell you to say it? Wasn't I talkin' to Sarah Maud?" The little Ruggleses hung their diminished heads. "Yes, marm," they piped more feebly. "Now git up all of ye and try it. Speak up, Sarah Maud." Sarah Maud's tongue clove to the roof of her mouth. "Quick! Ma thought it was sech a pleasant hat that we'd better leave our short walk to home," recited Sarah Maud in an agony of mental effort. This was too much for the boys. "Oh, whatever shall I do with ye?" moaned the unhappy mother. "I s'pose I've got to learn it to yer." Which she did, word for word, until Sarah Maud thought she could stand on her head and say it backwards. "Now, Cornelius, what are you goin' ter say to make yourself good comp'ny?" "Dunno," said Cornelius, turning pale. "Well, you ain't goin' to set there like a bump on a log 'thout sayin' a word ter pay for yer vittles, air you? Ask Mis' Bird how she's feelin' this evenin', and if Mr. Bird's havin' a busy season, or somethin' like that. Now we'll make believe we've got ter the dinner. That won't be so hard, 'cause yer'll have somethin' to do. It's awful bothersome ter stand around and act stylish. If they have napkins, Sarah Maud down to Peory may put 'em in their laps and the rest of you can tuck 'em in yer necks. Don't eat with yer fingers, don't grab no vittles off one 'nother's plates. Don't reach out for nothin', but wait till you're asked, and if you never git asked don't git up and grab it. Don't spill nothin' on the tablecloth, or like's not Mis' Bird'll send yer away from the table. Now we'll try a few things ter see how they'll go. Mr. Clement, do you eat cranberry sarse?" "Bet yer life!" cried Clem, who, not having taken in the idea exactly, had mistaken this for an ordinary family question. "Clement Ruggles, do you mean to tell me you'd say that to a dinner party? I'll give yer one more chance. Mr. Clement, will you take some of the cranberry?" "Yes, marm, thank ye kindly, if you happen ter have any handy." "Very good indeed. Mr. Peter, do you speak for white or dark meat?" "I ain't particular as ter color. Anything that nobody else won't will suit me," answered Peter with his best air. "First rate! Nobody could speak more genteel than that. Miss Kitty, will you have hard or soft sarse with your puddin'?" "A little of both, if you please, and I'm much obliged," said Kitty with decided ease and grace, at which all the other Ruggleses pointed the finger of shame at her, and Peter grunted expressively, that their meaning might not be mistaken. "You just stop your gruntin', Peter Ruggles. That was all right. I wish I could git it inter your heads that it ain't so much what yer say as the way yer say it. Ely, you and Larry's too little to train, so you just look at the rest, and do as they do, and the Lord have mercy on ye and help ye to act decent. Now is there anything more you'd like to practise?" "If you tell me one more thing I can't set up and eat," said Peter gloomily. "I'm so cram full o' manners now I'm ready ter bust 'thout no dinner at all." "Me too," chimed in Cornelius. "Well, I'm sorry for you both," rejoined Mrs. Ruggles sarcastically. "If the mountain o' manners you've got on hand now troubles ye, you're dreadful easy hurt. Now, Sarah Maud, after dinner, about once in so often you must say, 'I guess we'd better be goin',' and if they say, 'Oh, no, set a while longer,' yer can stay. But if they don't say nothin', you've got ter git up and go. Can you remember? About once in so often." Could any words in the language be fraught with more terrible and wearing uncertainty? "Well," answered Sarah Maud mournfully, "seems as if this whole dinner party's set right square on top o' me. Maybe I could manage my own manners, but ter manage 9 mannerses is worse'n stayin' to home." "Oh, don't fret," said her mother good naturedly. "I guess you'll git along. I wouldn't mind if folks would only say, 'Oh, childern will be childern,' but they won't. They'll say, 'Land o' goodness, who fetched them childern up?' Now it's 5:15. You can go, and whatever yer do, don't forget your mother was a McGrill." Chapter 6.
Chapter 6 of The Bird's Christmas Carol. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Katie Gibney. The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin. Chapter 6. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing. The children went out the back door quietly, and were presently lost to sight, Sarah Maud slipping and stumbling along absent-mindedly as she recited, under her breath, "It was such a pleasant evenin', and such a short walk, we thought we'd leave our hats to home." Peter rang the doorbell, and presently a servant admitted them, and, whispering something in Sarah's ear, drew her downstairs into the kitchen. The other Ruggleses stood in horror-stricken groups as the door closed behind their commanding officer, but there was no time for reflection, for a voice from above was heard saying, "Come right upstairs, please." Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do or die. Accordingly, they walked upstairs, and Elfrida, the nurse, ushered them into a room more splendid than anything they had ever seen. But oh, the woe! Where was Sarah Maud? And was it fate that Mrs. Bird should say, at once, "Did you lay your hats in the hall?" Peter felt himself elected by circumstances the head of the family, and casting one imploring look at tongue-tied Susan, standing next to him, said huskily, "It was so very pleasant that we hadn't good hats enough to go round," put in little Susan bravely, to help him out, and then froze with horror that the ill-fated words had slipped off her tongue. However, Mrs. Bird said pleasantly, "Of course you wouldn't wear hats such a short distance. I forgot when I asked. Now, will you come right into Miss Carol's room? She is so anxious to see you." Just then Sarah Maud came up the back stairs, so radiant with joy from her secret interview with the cook, that Peter could have pinched her with a clear conscience, and Carol gave them a joyful welcome. "But where is baby Larry?" she cried, looking over the group with searching eye. "Didn't he come?" Larry! Larry! Good gracious, where was Larry? They were all sure that he had come in with them, for Susan remembered scolding him for tripping over the doormat. Uncle Jack went into convulsions of laughter. "Are you sure there were 9 of you?" he asked merrily. "I think so, sir," said Peoria, timidly. "But anyhow, there was Larry," and she showed signs of weeping. "Oh, well, cheer up," cried Uncle Jack. "I guess he's not lost, only mislaid. I'll go and find him before you can say Jack Robinson." "I'll go too, if you please, sir," said Sarah Maud, "for it was my place to mind him, and if he's lost I can't relish my victuals." The other Ruggleses stood rooted to the floor. Was this a dinner party, forsooth? And, if so, why were such things ever spoken of as festive occasions? Sarah Maud went out through the hall, calling, "Larry! Larry!" and without any interval of suspense a thin voice piped up from below, "Here I be!" The truth was that Larry, being deserted by his natural guardian, dropped behind the rest, and wriggled into the hat tree to wait for her, having no notion of walking unprotected into the jaws of a dinner party. Finding that she did not come, he tried to call from his refuge and call somebody, when, dark and dreadful ending to a tragic day, he found that he was too much intertwined with umbrellas and canes to move a single step. He was afraid to yell. When I have said this of Larry Ruggles, I have pictured a state of helpless terror that ought to wring tears from every eye, and the sound of Sarah Maud's beloved voice, some seconds later, was like a strain of angel music in his ears. Uncle Jack dried his tears, carried him upstairs, and soon had him in breathless fits of laughter, while Carol so made the other Ruggleses forget themselves that they were soon talking like accomplished diners out. Carol's bed had been moved into the farthest corner of the room, and she was lying on the outside, dressed in a wonderful soft white wrapper. Her golden hair fell in soft fluffy curls over her white forehead and neck, her cheeks flushed delicately, her eyes beamed with joy, and the children told their mother, afterwards, that she looked as beautiful as the pictures of the Blessed Virgin. There was great bustle behind a huge screen in another part of the room, and at 5:30 this was taken away, and the Christmas dinner table stood revealed, What a wonderful sight it was to the poor little Ruggles children, who ate their sometimes scanty meals on the kitchen table! It blazed with tall colored candles, it gleamed with glass and silver, it blushed with flowers, it groaned with good things to eat, so it was not strange that the Ruggleses, forgetting that their mother was a McGrill, shrieked in admiration of the fairy spectacle. But Larry's behavior was the most disgraceful, for he stood not upon the order of his going, but went at once for a high chair that pointed unmistakably to him, climbed up like a squirrel, gave a comprehensive look at the turkey, clapped his hands in ecstasy, rested his fat arms on the table, and cried, with joy, "I beat the whole lot of yer!" Carol laughed until she cried, giving orders meanwhile. "Uncle Jack, please sit at the head, Sarah Maud at the foot, and that will leave 4 on each side. Mama is going to help Elfrida, so that the children need not look after each other, but just have a good time." A sprig of holly lay by each plate, and nothing would do but each little Ruggles must have his seat and have it pinned on by Carol, and as each course was served one of them pleaded to take something to her. There was hurrying to and fro, I can assure you, for it is quite a difficult matter to serve a Christmas dinner on the 3rd floor of a great city house; but if every dish had had to be carried up a rope ladder, the servants would gladly have done so. There was turkey and chicken, with delicious gravy and stuffing, and there were a half-dozen vegetables with cranberry jelly and celery and pickles; and as for the way these delicacies were served, the Ruggleses never forgot it as long as they lived. Peter nudged Kitty, who sat next to him, and said, "Look, will yer, every feller's got his own particular butter. I s'pose that's to show yer can eat that much and no more. No, it ain't neither, for that pig of a Peory's just gettin' another helpin'." "Yes," whispered Kitty, "and the napkins is marked with big red letters. I wonder if that's so nobody'll nip 'em. And, oh, Peter, look at the pictures painted right on the dishes. Did yer ever?" "The plum is all took out of my cranberry sarse, and it's frizzed to a stiff jell," shouted Peoria, in wild excitement. "Hi-yah! I got a wishbone!" sung Larry, regardless of Sarah Maud's frown, after which she asked to have his seat changed, giving as excuse that he generally sat beside her and would "feel strange," the true reason being that she desired to kick him gently under the table whenever he passed what might be termed the McGrill line. "I declare to goodness," murmured Susan on the other side, "there's so much to look at I can't scarcely eat nothin'." "Bet your life I can," said Peter, who had kept one servant busily employed ever since he sat down; for, luckily, no one was asked by Uncle Jack whether he would have a second helping, but the dishes were quietly passed under their noses, and not a single Ruggles refused anything that was offered him, even unto the 7th time. Then, when Carol and Uncle Jack perceived that more turkey was a physical impossibility, the meats were taken off and the dessert was brought in. A dessert that would have frightened a strong man after such a dinner as had preceded it. Not so the Ruggleses, for a strong man is nothing to a small boy, and they kindled to the dessert as if the turkey had been a dream and the 6 vegetables an optical delusion. There was plum pudding, mince pie, and ice cream, and there were nuts and raisins and oranges. Kitty chose ice cream, explaining that she knew it by sight, but hadn't never tasted none; but all the rest took the entire variety, without any regard to consequences. "My dear child," whispered Uncle Jack as he took Carol an orange, "there is no doubt about the necessity of this feast, but I do advise you after this to have them twice a year, or quarterly perhaps, for the way they eat is positively dangerous. I assure you I tremble for that terrible Peoria. I'm going to run races with her after dinner." "Never mind," laughed Carol. "Let them eat for once. It does my heart good to see them, and they shall come back oftener next year." The feast being over, the Ruggleses lay back in their chairs languidly, and the table was cleared in a trice. Then a door was opened into the next room, and there, in a corner facing Carol's bed, which had been wheeled as close as possible, stood the brilliantly lighted Christmas tree, glittering with gilded walnuts and tiny silver balloons, and wreathed with snowy chains of popcorn. The presents had been bought mostly with Carol's store money, and were selected after long consultations with Mrs. Bird. Each girl had a blue knitted hood, and each boy a red crocheted comforter, all made by Mama, Carol, and Elfrida. "Because if you buy everything, it doesn't show so much love," said Carol. Then every girl had a pretty plaid dress of a different color, and every boy a warm coat of the right size. Here the useful presents stopped, and they were quite enough, but Carol had pleaded to give them something for fun. "I know they need the clothes," she had said, when they were talking over the matter just after Thanksgiving, "but they don't care much for them after all. Now, Papa, won't you please let me go without part of my presents this year, and give me the money they would cost, to buy something to amuse them?" "You can have both," said Mr. Bird promptly. "Is there any need of my little girl's going without her Christmas, I should like to know? Spend all the money you like." "But that isn't the thing," objected Carol, nestling close to her father. "It wouldn't be mine. What is the use? Haven't I almost everything already? And am I not the happiest girl in the world this year, with Uncle Jack and Donald at home? Now, Papa, you know very well it is more blessed to give than to receive. Then why won't you let me do it? You never look half as happy when you're getting your presents as when you are giving us ours. Now, Papa, submit, or I shall have to be very firm and disagreeable with you." "Very well, your Highness, I surrender." "That's a dear Papa. Now, what were you going to give me? Confess." "A bronze figure of Santa Claus, and in the little round belly that shakes, when he laughs, like a bowl full of jelly, is a wonderful clock. Oh, you would never give it up if you could see it." "Nonsense!" laughed Carol. "As I never have to get up to breakfast, nor go to bed, nor catch trains, I think my old clock will do very well. Now, Mamma, what were you going to give me?" "Oh, I hadn't decided. A few more books, and a gold thimble, and a smelling bottle, and a music box." "Poor Carol!" laughed the child merrily. "She can afford to give up these lovely things, for there will still be left Uncle Jack and Donald, and Paul and Hugh, and Uncle Rob, and Aunt Elsie, and a dozen other people." So Carol had her way, as she generally did, but it was usually a good way, which was fortunate under the circumstances, and Sarah Maud had a set of Miss Alcott's books, and Peter a modest silver watch, Cornelius a tool chest, Clement a dog house for his lame puppy, Larry a magnificent Noah's Ark, and each of the little girls a beautiful doll. You can well believe that everybody was very merry and very thankful. All the family, from Mr. Bird down to the cook, said they had never seen so much happiness in the space of 3 hours. But it had to end, as all things do. The candles flickered and went out, the tree was left alone with its gilded ornaments, and Mrs. Bird sent the children downstairs at 8:30, thinking that Carol looked tired. "Now, my darling, you have done quite enough for one day," said Mrs. Bird, getting Carol into her little night dress. "I am afraid you will feel worse to-morrow, and that would be a sad ending to such a good time." "Oh, wasn't it a lovely, lovely time!" sighed Carol. "From first to last, everything was just right. I shall never forget Larry's face when he looked at the turkey, nor Peter's when he saw his watch, nor that sweet, sweet Kitty's smile when she kissed her dolly, nor the tears in poor dull Sarah Maud's eyes when she thanked me for her books, nor—" "But we mustn't talk any longer about it to-night," said Mrs. Bird, anxiously. "You are too tired, dear." "I am not so very tired, Mamma. I have felt well all day, not a bit of pain anywhere. Perhaps this has done me good." "Perhaps. I hope so." There was no noise or confusion. It was just a merry time. "Now, may I close the door and leave you alone? I will steal in softly the first thing in the morning and see if you are all right, but I think you need to be quiet." "Oh, I'm willing to stay alone, but I am not sleepy yet, and I am going to hear the music by and by, you know." "Yes, I have opened the window a little and put the screen in front of it, so that you will not feel the air. Can I have the shutters open? And won't you turn my bed a little, please? This morning I woke ever so early, and one bright beautiful star shone in that eastern window. I never saw it before, and I thought of the star in the east, that guided the wise men to the place where Jesus was. Good night, Mamma. Such a happy, happy day." "Good night, my precious little Christmas Carol, Mother's blessed Christmas child." "Bend your head a minute, Mother dear," whispered Carol, calling her mother back. "Mamma dear, I do think that we have kept Christ's birthday this time just as He would like it, don't you?" "I am sure of it," said Mrs. Bird softly.
Chapter 7 of The Bird's Christmas Carol. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sarah Jennings.
Music by Missy.
The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin. Chapter 7. The Birdling Flies Away. The Ruggleses had finished a last romp in the library with Paul and Hugh, and Uncle Jack had taken them home, and stayed a while to chat with Mrs. Ruggles, who opened the door for them, her face all aglow with excitement and delight. When Kitty and Clem showed her the oranges and nuts they had kept for her, she astonished them by saying that at 6 o'clock Mrs. Bird had sent her in the finest dinner she had ever seen in her life, and not only that, but a piece of dress goods that must have cost $1 a yard if it cost a cent. As Uncle Jack went down the little porch, he looked back into the window for a last glimpse of the family, as the children gathered about their mother, showing their beautiful presents again and again, and then upward to a window in the great house yonder. A little child shall lead them, he thought. Well, if anything ever happens to Carol, I will take the Ruggleses under my wing. Softly, Uncle Jack, whispered the boys as he walked into the library a little while later. We are listening to the music in the church. They sang Carol, Brothers, Carol a while ago, and now we think the organist is beginning to play My Ain Country for Carol. I hope she hears it, said Mrs. Bird. But they are very late tonight, and I dare not speak to her lest she should be asleep. It is after 10 o'clock. The boy soprano, clad in white surplice, stood in the organ loft. The lamps shone full upon his crown of fair hair, and his pale face with its serious blue eyes looked paler than usual. Perhaps it was something in the tender thrill of the voice, or in the sweet words, but there were tears in many eyes, both in the church and in the great house next door.
I am far from my hame, I am weary often was, for the longed for home bringen, and my father's welcome smiles, and I'll ne'er be for content until my eyne do see the garden gates of heaven in my ain country. The earth is decked with flowers, money tinted fresh and gay, and the birdies warble blithely, for my father made them say. But these sights and these sounds will as nothing be to me, when I hear the angels singing in my ain country. Like a band to its mither, a wee birdie to its nest, I fain would be ganging now unto my father's breast, for he gathers in his arms helpless, worthless lambs like me, and carries them himself to his ain country.
There were tears in many eyes, but not in Carol's. The loving heart had quietly ceased to beat, and the wee birdie in the great house had flown to its home nest. Carol had fallen asleep. But as to the song, I think perhaps, I cannot say, she heard it after all. So sad an ending to a happy day, perhaps, to those who were left, and yet Carol's mother, even in the freshness of her grief, was glad that her darling had slipped away on the loveliest day of her life, out of its glad content into everlasting peace. She was glad that she had gone as she had come, on wings of song, when all the world was brimming over with joy, glad of every grateful smile, of every joyous burst of laughter, of every loving thought and word and deed the dear last day had brought. Sadness reigned, it is true, in the little house behind the garden, and one day poor Sarah Maud, with the courage born of despair, threw on her hood and shawl, walked straight to a certain house a mile away, dashed up the marble steps and into good Dr. Bartol's office, falling at his feet as she cried, "Oh, sir, it was me and our children went to Miss Carol's last dinner party, and if we made her worse we can't never be happy again." Then the kind old gentleman took her rough hand in his, and told her to dry her tears, for neither she nor any of her flock had hastened Carol's flight. Indeed, he said that had it not been for the strong hopes and wishes that filled her tired heart, she could not have stayed long enough to keep that last merry Christmas with her dear ones. And so the old years, fraught with memories, die one after another, and the new years, bright with hopes, are born to take their places. But Carol lives again in every chime of Christmas bells that peal glad tidings, and in every Christmas anthem sung by childish voices. End of Chapter 7. End of The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin.